What do I need to do to prepare myself before I deliver this story to the world?
I always say rehearse, 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 and then let it go. But my number one tip for if you're gonna get in front of an audience and people say, well, how do I not feel nervous? And what I do is I get on stage, I plant myself, and I...
All right, welcome back to the None of Your Business podcast. We are here today with Coach Jimmy Nelson.
What's up, man?
Super excited to have you on the show. In this time of transition for you, a lot of people know you as Coach Jimmy.
They do.
Because of the fitness side.
Yeah.
But now we're here today to talk about storytelling, crafting a story, overcoming ourselves to share our message with the world. And that's something that's super important to me because I have always believed that the world's greatest providers, the people that have the potential for the greatest impact, they live in relative obscurity because they fail to embrace the concepts of marketing and sales. In other words, they fail to create awareness through marketing about the story that they have that could literally change the world. You know how many people I talk to that are like, oh my gosh, Sean, if just more people knew about my thing.
Fill in the blank,
Fill in the blank. And a lot of times, one, they're just complacent, so they're not out there sharing. But sometimes they have a really cool thing and they are trying to share. You go onto social media, you go on, they have their emails or wherever you find them, but it's confusing. Even they can come on this show and talk to us, and at the end, sometimes I'm confused. I'm like, I'm not even really sure what you do. There's this whole show that we do, Go Fund Yourself, right?
Okay,
These
yeah.
pitches. And sometimes people come up and they pitch, and even at the end of the pitch, you're like, I'm not even really sure exactly what you do.
Yeah.
That's where you come in.
That's where I come in.
Tell us about this idea of selling, creating awareness through storytelling.
Through storytelling. It's so crazy, and there has been so many transitions. I mean, even right here, I'm just taking in this stage for a minute because for me, in my own story, former 100-pound overweight, 3-time college dropout, and I'm like, how did I get here? It's all part of the story, right? And we have to continue to remind people where we were in our story. If I know this version of you, I'm not emotionally connected. Think of your favorite, any brand. If it's a clothing brand, if it's a liquor brand, if it's your favorite, material, your favorite movie, it's because you have some emotional connection with it, right? There's some emotion. Even the most analytical of us are still emotional decision makers, but we emotionally make a decision and then justify it with our analytics. And so I always think what I try to do when I sit down with somebody, specifically somebody, maybe they have a great investment pitch. They are super analytical, and that happens so often. They'll tell me all about what it is, and I'm like, wow, that sounds great. What is it? One more time. And if I can get them to pause and tell me a story and connect with it, whether it's a story about the brand or a story about their products and service, but they can also tell me a story about, I tell a silly story about me in the first grade singing in front of an audience for the first time when I give my keynote. And I can tell a story that has nothing to do with my product or service, but then what we help our clients do is how do you tie that story into what it is that you do? What's that parallel? So you have that emotional connection with the audience starting out.
Tell me the story about you singing in front of...
Oh, so the very first... Okay, you want the full story?
Yeah.
You're here, might as well tell the story. The greatest addiction of my life, I was exposed to in the first grade. So I was a little fat kid in West Texas, in Lubbock, Texas, in the early 80s. And this was before there was a childhood obesity epidemic. I was the fat kid in my class, and I was kind of awkward, and one of the only kids I knew that had, my parents were split, but the entire elementary school was doing a Christmas play. We were talking Christmas earlier. A Christmas play, and each grade got to do a different number. In my first grade class, we were gonna do a musical number called Too Fat for the Chimney. Gripping story of how Santa was not gonna be able to deliver presents because he was too fat for the chimney, and I just thought, here's my shot. I'm the fat kid in the class, this is gonna be awesome. And they cast my best friend, Justin Martin, as Santa. He was the most popular kid in class, so politics reigned in first grade there as well. And they wrapped a bunch of pillows around him, and they pushed him to upstage. Upstage, I guess it'd be like furthest away from the audience. All the other kids in class, they dressed up, and I'm gonna age myself again as we were talking earlier, like Jane Fonda, jazzercise, the headband, the leggings, the warm, and they did like an entire step routine upstage. Yours truly, awkward, fat little Jimmy. My grandmother had made me a onesie pajama, feety pajamas, with like the drop bottom and the stupid stocking cap, like out of a Dickens novel. They push me to the edge of the stage, and I get to sing the solo, Too Fat for the Chimney. And it's like It's the principal, it's the school, it's the really cool sixth graders who are like the big kids, and I'm just like, he's too fat for the chimney, too fat for the chimney. And just like that, I love it when I get a smile. That's what happened. I got a smile, I got a nod, and it was the very first time in my life I'd ever got a positive emotional response from an audience. And when I give that keynote where I pivot and I say, you know what? For the last 17 years, I've been helping business owners just like you connect emotionally with your audience before you tell them what they do so they want to do business with you long term.
I know I don't have the audience mic, but I want to know this. So why does the audience smile?
Because they see, I can tell my story can be the most personal story. I'm probably the only person in this room that can say I was a 100-pound overweight, 3-time college dropout. But there's something in my story where they can relate to a time they were nervous, to a place where they were disappointed, to where they didn't fit in. And so they're either gonna do that on their own, or I can use a technique that we say, hey, for me, it was feeling awkward in the first grade. For you, it might be, and if I know my audience well enough, I can make that connection for them.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing that, I've had multiple conversations, especially when we deal with business. When we want to create awareness, we have the same, you're talking about a pitch, but let's take it to like I have caffeinated gum.
Right.
I'm super excited about my caffeinated gum. So when I hear you talk about, whoa, we have to craft a story, my tendency, my first thought is I'm going to create a story about caffeinated gum. But in reality, I've been talking to a lot of my clients that you need to create a story about them.
Right.
That at least that they could see themselves in.
Yes.
To understand why they need the caffeinated gum, because the caffeinated gum is far less important than them.
Yes.
So what you do then is people oftentimes then say, but I don't have a story like that. My life's been blah. I never sang in the first grade.
Right.
But
what a silly little story that is. It's a day-to-day story, but you're right. It connects with the audience.
Well, how do I find my story?
Okay.
That I would tell to somebody.
So I always start with our clients. We always ask two things. Who is your ideal audience, and what problem are you trying to solve for them? So I'm just going to assume the caffeinated gum story is something about an energy lull somewhere where you weren't sharp, somewhere where you had an opportunity and you weren't on your game. Maybe there is a silly little, maybe it is. Sometimes it is the story about your product. We call that, if your journey is the customer's journey, then you can share that story. When I was in fitness, my weight loss story was the customer journey. But in something like this, maybe there's a silly, a day-to-day situation in your life where there was an opportunity mid-afternoon and somehow you missed it, or somehow you weren't sharp, or you didn't know the right answer in something and you missed an opportunity. Man, but if you'd had your caffeinated gum, that's never gonna happen to me again. For me, it was forgetting the answer in a meeting. For you, it may be that time that you gotta pick your kids up in the afternoon and you gotta be sharp for the soccer game even though you can go in all day. And you can just make these little analogies and these parallel stories that you say, for me it was this, for you it might be A, B, or C.
And it's shrouded or wrapped in a story.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Wrapped in a story.
So you would tell some story about sometime in the middle of the afternoon where you had a lull or something, whatever's problem, and we're using caffeinated gum as an example, but whatever problem you're solving, you can make the parallel of that time. For me, I felt awkward until I learned to connect with an audience. I was nervous in front of people until I started to learn to talk with my audience and not at my audience, which is another thing that we do a lot with our clients.
Well, I was just going to say, so that's the next one, which probably is even a bigger hurdle, is I have my story. Even people that come on the podcast are like, all right, so I've got to prep. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to say? Why? Because fear of public speaking.
Sure.
It's interesting to me to look at behavioral dynamics and how often fear drives us either to do things or to not do things. For whatever reason, public speaking, and I don't even actually know, who knows if that's actually true, that people have a fear of public speaking, but we've convinced everybody that they do.
If they didn't, they do now because we keep telling them
Keep
they
saying
do.
it.
Yes.
They're more afraid of that than death is what we say, right? But if I can understand what you're saying, and I always tell people too, you have a moral obligation. You have this purpose, this thing that you're taking to the world. Yeah. You want to make film. You want to change the way that people look at art. You want to bring jujitsu to the world. You want to bring chiropractic to the world. Well, the only way we're going to do that is if we share it. And what you're saying is, right, and the most effective way to share it would be through stories. Mm-hmm. But I can't just sit and tell myself the story. So now I'm going to have to amplify my voice and share the story to as many people as possible. Yeah. But now I've become afraid. Now you apparently are not afraid. Like you are an MC, public speaker, you do.
Not now.
Okay, so tell us about that.
My
How do
very
we,
first
how do we
audition.
do that?
My very first audition in college. I kind of came into theater late in life. We were talking about animation earlier. I grew up wanting to be an animator for Disney. That's where I thought I was going to be able to just hide behind pencil and paper. And so when I finally started performing at my heaviest, the first great thing happened, and then I got back off stage for a while. And so my first audition in college, I was supposed to come in and have an entire monologue memorized and be able to present it to the casting director. And I joke, I don't joke that I literally used to have a physical, like I would shake like this, one of those things where you look and you're like, stop shaking, it won't. And it was one of these things where, I think we've all had this, there's something you know you're supposed to do in life, but you have all these reasons why you're like, well, I can't. Hey, I know I'm supposed to be on stage, but I'm heavy, but I'm not confident, but I have this shake. And for me, it was stepping into that fear. And I just say, hey, look, if I can start where I started, it's reps. And where I feel a lot of, if you want to call it speaking coaches, I think where they drop the ball, and I feel like where we really pride ourselves, me and my partners, is we give them a safe place to get in reps. When I first moved to New York City, I had a director friend of mine in Dallas said, you need to get in this scene study class. A bunch of professional actors, they meet every Tuesday. So I said, okay, that makes sense. You've got to go practice. It's like going to the gym. So I walk in there and I got so super nervous because I recognized people in the class. I'm like, oh, I know you from a soap opera. And you're on Les Mis. And all of a sudden I froze because all of a sudden I thought, I'm not as good as these people. And I always feel kind of bad saying this. What gave me the most confidence in that class was watching them be awful. The director would give them a new scene or a new monologue or something, and they'd be awful. And I was like, oh, they're not better than me. They just have a safe place to fail. And in that room, they would get reps, and nobody would judge them. And it was like, cool, try this. Oh, that doesn't work. And sometimes you'd find like happy accidents. So after we come in and craft this message with our clients, then it's, let's get reps in. And I think that's the one thing people just, I got the talk written, I have the presentation, but they aren't willing to go through the being bad. You don't get to skip that spot. You know, there's certain people inherently that may be a little bit better at public speaking than others, but you gotta get the reps in. It's just like going to the gym. You have to be willing, and sometimes that just means pulling out your phone and going live on Instagram and 2 people pop in. I always say that's the best, because it's like low stakes repetition, but you're getting high stake reps, because the last thing you wanna do is the very first time, this story that we've crafted together, is give it the very first time in front of that ideal audience. You gotta get the reps in.
How else can you get the reps? Because I like that, because as you were saying that, I'm like, well, where do I get practice? Because it's not the same to just do it in my room.
No.
Because there's no audience,
Yeah.
right? So or even if I was like, oh, I'll set up a camera and I'll just do it, but it's not the same. I like that.
Yeah.
Live.
Live's a good one.
Raise the stakes a little bit.
Yep.
Where else can I kind of cut my teeth?
I encourage people to look for like networking lunches. They're all over the place in every city. It's like a little networking lunch, and they usually go around and everybody gets 1 minute to stand up and talk about what they do. And you would think 1 minute isn't very long, but for the past 3 years, Grant Cardone had a thing called the Great American Speak Off. And I was a judge for this. And think of it as American Idol for a speaking competition. And we'd go to all these cities, and people would get to come into a room and give a 1 minute story. And I've seen a one-act play in 1 minute. I've seen some brilliant stories in a minute where if what I'm trying to do is connect with you emotionally, teach you something, and give you a call to action, even if the call to action is just think differently. It doesn't have to be pitching your actual product. You can do that in a minute. So if they find these little networking lunches and things like that in their hometown, again, if you get up and bomb, fine, you bombed. You're probably never going to see those people again, but you got in a solid rep.
I like that. I remember Tony Schriller came on the podcast, comedian, and stand up, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take a shot at it because I'm not a comedian.
Right.
I'm gonna try it, and if I'm at all good at it, that's what he said. If I'm at all good at it, then I'm going to do it again. That's right. So not if I excelled at it, but if I was 1 out of 100 good at it, then I'll do it again. See if I can get to 3 out of 100. And I love that idea of like, okay, let's just give a 60-second elevator pitch.
Sure.
And if I'm at all good at it, I'll try it again. And then just keep getting those reps and doing it over and over. Now, let's say I do that, and then I'm like, okay, great, I've done that 28 times, Jimmy. Now I'm going to take it onto the stage with my ideal audience.
Yep.
Help me set my mindset for expectation there. What do I need to do to prepare myself before I deliver this story to the world?
I always say rehearse, 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 and then let it go. And I used to do the same thing as an actor. It was a process of like, I want to go over my talk. I don't necessarily script things out word for word for word. Some clients, they definitely want that. We're like, cool, let's write it out initially. Usually we'll get to bullet points. And it's just like, cool, do you know where you're going? The opening story, the transition is where people get hung up. If they're transitioning from the story to what the product does or what the call to action is. So we'll go over that. But then I said, you gotta let it go. Because I think if you're over-rehearsed, you gotta leave room for the magic. There's times I've been on stage and something has flown out of my mouth that I didn't prepare at all. And I just look at God and I'm like, thank you for that one. Or somebody's like, oh, I loved this part of you saying this on stage. And I said that? And they're like, yeah, look, here's the video. And it's one of those things that just be prepared. People that just say, I'm gonna wing it, God bless you, most of the time you can tell. You just can tell. And even if you're good, you can be better. But my number one tip for if you're gonna get in front of an audience and people say, well, how do I not feel nervous? I was nervous sitting in the back of this room watching the last guest before I got up here. The minute I'm not nervous, it doesn't matter to me anymore. But what I learned to do, specifically in front of a large audience, I was on the Aspire Tour stage. It's 5,000 people in there, and that's a lot of bodies looking at you. And what I do is I get on stage, I plant myself, and I find one person that smiles at me. When I was in the first grade, I found the biggest addiction of my life. Because see, when you was in the first grade, and then I can move around the room. Because I find, and there's been times I've realized I've skipped that step, and this little voice in the back of my head goes, Jimmy, you're not connecting with anyone. You are looking into a black void, and they are thinking about lunch, or their bathroom break, or looking at their phones. But here's what else you train your audience to do when you do that. If I say my first line to you, the person over here goes, oh, he's talking to us. And all of a sudden they play up because I might be coming to you next, and I might be coming to you next, and you don't want to be that person that's like out. And I'm not asking for a call and response necessarily, but if I'm having a conversation and we're gonna, create this thing together, then you feel your energy's up. You're like, oh, he may come my way. I may need an emotional response from him as well. And so for me, it's say that first line to one. Same way if you're having coffee with somebody, the same way you just talk to your friend, and it helps for me kind of calm some of those nerves.
Bizarre question. I don't even know. I don't know if you've ever gotten this, but I deal with a lot of clients that want to do workshops. Mm-hmm. So they're not 5,000 people on the Aspire Tour stage.
It's almost like a cabaret.
Well, sometimes we've done our prep, we're ready to go, and there's not even 3, there's 2 people there. I think that giving a talk to 2 people is harder than giving a talk to 5,000 people.
It is.
So
you're absolutely right, it is.
Any tips on when it just didn't quite go how I wanted, and I've got the 2 people sitting in the 2 chairs and me standing up there doing my presentation?
Yeah. First of all, I just acknowledge it. Instead of one of these things like, well, thank you for everyone coming out today. Like, I gotta just shine a light on it. You might as well shine a light on it and laugh at it a bit. Funny story about that, and this is answering your question. One of the very first, and I MC a lot of gigs as well, and one of the very first big MC gigs I had, again, giant room in Colorado, and at that point, I hadn't got on the stage yet. It was this weird thing that I didn't open the entire event. And the event planner comes over and said, hey, Jimmy, right coming out of this break, can you jump on stage, introduce yourself? We were gonna do a speaking competition that night, remind people to come in that night and bring up our next speaker. I was like, in like 2-minute notice. I was like, okay, sure. Yes, and. You learned that in improv class, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, and. So I grabbed the mic and I think of something. I was like, okay, I think I know what to do. DJ plays some music. I jump on stage, 5,000 people looking around. And I'm like, hey, my name's Jimmy Hayes Nelson. Most people just call me Coach Jimmy. I have a background in theater. And I try to get into my intro and the mic goes out. And I don't know this audience from Adam. There's no home field advantage. And all of a sudden from the back of the house comes the tech guy with another mic and hands that to me. And I happened to make eye contact with the sound guy. And I just kind of nodded, and he knew somehow we connected in the midst of this chaos. I ran back off stage. He restarted the music. I popped back on stage and I go, I don't know if you've heard, but my name's Jimmy, and I used to be in theater, and I get a little bit further into it, second mic goes out. So if you've been to those really big events where they have like the mic that's like in a foam thing, and they can throw them around, somebody from the audience hurls this thing at me. That mic goes out. I just think I'm being punked. at this point. But the whole time, I just kind of keep making a joke about it. I'm just shining a light. Can you believe this? And so finally, I dropped that mic, and I at least got the intro out that I had a theater background. So I just go full Shakespeare voice and hit the back of the room as if I was on a stage like a Shakespeare in the Park or something in New York. I go through it, I make a joke about it, but this time the audience is on my side. They're rooting me on, and I hand it off to the speaker. And the people, the event runners for this particular event do all the events for Tony Robbins and Russell Brunson, some of the biggest events in the world. It was my first time working with them. I'm like, whew, got that. I come off stage, and she comes and gives me the biggest bear hug, and she's like, Jimmy, I will put you on any stage, anywhere. And I didn't think I did anything, but I was like, why? She's like, do you know how many people I've seen melt down in that situation? So that goes back to you walk in and there's two people. Instead of going, oh, I still gotta make this big presentation, it's like, well, welcome to your intimate workshop. We're gonna get a great, you have to shine the light on it. You just have to acknowledge it and then get back to what you were gonna teach.
Let's then go to one person.
Okay.
Because these same constructs apply if I want to communicate, sell a concept to one person.
Yeah.
So how do I take your teachings, everything that you teach your clients to do, and now I apply that in one-to-one?
Yeah. So like right now, I'm literally leaving here and going to work with some venture capitalist guys that do a lot of one-on-one pitching. And it's the idea that you still have to paint the vision before the opportunity, right? And so it's just learning to have a conversation. It's over coffee again. But instead of going straight to that spreadsheet or that PowerPoint deck or sliding the ROI, like here's your return on investment, it could be as simple as me still telling you that silly little story of, Sean, I'm glad that you're here. I think I have a cool opportunity before you. But before you understand that, you can understand where I came from. Because in first grade, and I start painting that picture, and I'm like, that's silly for me, but this is what I think it means for you. Because I think the opportunity is, if we can get your story right, I think that you can touch more people. You can serve more, bigger masterminds. Your reach is gonna be further. You're gonna get more DMs. People are gonna respond to your call to action. But it's just a matter of having a conversation. And really, if you can master the one-to-one, you can do this in front of 5,000 people. Because if you'll talk to them, like I'm talking to you, their audience will love you. And think about that. I've heard speakers, or if you've ever heard like a sermon when you're out there and you're like, is he just talking to me? And it's like, but if I come off the stage and somebody goes, oh, Jimmy, I just feel like you were talking just to me, I feel like that's the greatest compliment, because I wasn't talking at the audience. So it's literally the same thing. I'm not thinking of what is this talk. It's just having those bullet points of story, educate them on something, what do I want them to do?
Last thing that I have is you've been through this process. You coach people that speak. A lot of people, I'm not going to say all of them because there is that fear of public speaking, but a lot of people who I meet, they want to be speakers. They say like, I could sell my thing more if I could get on stages. Sure. Well, that's not the easiest thing to do. Mm-hmm. So once somebody has a story, once somebody has the training, has done the practice, done the lives, how do they find the platforms to be able to share their message with the world beyond just the two people that they can get through their email list?
No, absolutely. Right now, I am an example of this. I am leveraging an audience that is not mine, it is yours, to share my message, right? And there's a few ways to do that. I would immediately start doing research of okay, who is my ideal audience? What problem am I solving? Where do these people gather? Either physically or online. Who do I know that already serves this audience, but maybe doesn't solve the exact problem I solve? And if you're reaching out to be on a podcast or be on someone's stage or their YouTube channel and stuff, don't lead with your resume. I would lead with, Sean, what I love about your show as I watch it is that you have such a diverse audience and you want to help them in so many ways. And I'm going to go on in episode 3 the other day when you had what I also know about your audience is while you're helping them, a lot of them want to be able to speak as well and they don't know where to go. If there's ever a way I can serve your audience and come on and share some of my experiences with what I know is public speaking that would help your audience, I'd love to help out. And it's always, if you're going to leverage somebody else's audience, how are you helping their audience? And I see speakers do this all the time. Oh, here's my resume. I exited this company this, blah, 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 and nobody cares. I mean, they'll care eventually, but initially it's, can you solve my problem? And so I think when I'm trying to leverage somebody else's audience, because I never take this for granted. You are trusting me with your audience. And I don't care if somebody's trusting you with 2 people, making a connection, that's a referral, that's a big deal. Because then you got to show up for them and say, they're vouching for you as well. But if you can leverage other people's audiences until you build your own stage, then you start, oh yeah, I saw you on that pod. It happens to me all the time, either in my Instagram, a lot of my Instagram, oh, I saw you on such and such podcast. Hey, I have a show. Can you be on my, and then it just kind of starts snowballing as well.
That applies to those stages, like speaking on stages?
Oh my gosh, like the actual, it's a buddy of mine, Brian Galkey, who you guys had on the show. We joke about what a big little fraternity this public speaking world is. And it's like, it's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but it's just the speaking world. So another tip, be nice. Be nice. It seems like it's so huge, and it's shocking to me that there are people out there with bad reputations that still get put on stages at times. But you just never know when the next opportunity opens up. And so it works the same way, whether it's podcasts or people like on your physical stages as well.
I love it. Anything else that we didn't capture? I want to know how people can get in touch with you if they have a story inside of them. Or maybe they think they don't have a story inside of them and they want to uncover that.
Yeah.
They want to refine it and they want to share it. How can people work with you?
Yeah, number one, and I'm gonna look in the camera here because I'm looking at you. You have a story. You're just too close to it, and you don't think it's a big deal because you did it. And I have 5 C's. I have a whole framework to teach you your well-crafted story. So if you just go to storywellcrafted.com, the whole thing's in a PDF. Storywellcrafted.com, we map out all 5 C's. How do you craft that story? And what it is, it's a PDF that goes straight to your phone. And what it does is, before you go live next time, or before you have that one-on-one meeting, I go, okay, what are the 5 C's Jimmy told me? Okay, clarity, connection, and you go through all of them, and you're like, okay, I'm good to go. And then you have that talk, or you have that meeting. And what that means for you is then you're prepared. Instead of just being all over the place, you have a through line to connect with somebody emotionally, teach them something, and give them a call to action.
Love it. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. This is great. Appreciate it.